Good evening. Welcome to another segment of the DCTV series on the network of global corporate control. That is a long phrase for the banking cartel, and we've taken that title from an article that was written by three mathematicians in Switzerland's largest and best university, the Federal Institute of Technology. Now, I have circulated a teleprompter, which I'm not going to be using tonight because the teleprompter is broken. We never know what to expect because we are up against the banking cartel, which is a very large company that has been with humanity now from the previous ice age. We've been studying it. Most of what I learn is because I'm sitting in the center of the international financial system, and I'm working together with all the whistleblowers and all the people in the world who have figured out that we're actually up against this big company that has been ruining our lives and has been starting wars, and it's actually the owner of all of the media, all of the mainstream media and most of the alternative media. And you've seen I've canceled a number of appearances because I didn't want to be censored. And I didn't want stress interviews, which is what I was getting. People were not allowing me to tell everyone about something called the Global Debt Facility, which is a fancy name for a trust fund that was set up at the end of World War II that contains all of the world's wealth, just about. It contains all of the monetary gold reserves of the United States and the other nations. It was deposited there by Ferdinand Marcos, who was the lawyer for something called the Black Pope, Jose Rizal, who went to the Vatican after he came from the Philippines and they were trying to execute him. So he went to the Vatican and he rose up through the ranks and he became the Black Pope, which is actually over the existing Pope. There's a whole infrastructure which we've been explaining in great detail. The head of the snake is working with all of the spy agencies of the world, and all of the governments of the world are actually converted into companies and directed from the center by this head of the snake, which has come down to us from the pharaohs in Egypt. There's something called the bloodline families, which most of them are in Italy, and they've been over the world and directing the world and directing the Jesuits. And there's been a lot of controversy because that's what the head of the snake wants. They want us to fight each other, and they're using their media to give us stories, most of which are just directed by this head of the snake. Now, if you read the teleprompter that I thought I was actually going to be presenting, what we were going to talk about is an extraordinary event that happened on the 18th, last Saturday, the 18th of November. What happened was a Marine exploratory unit, a whole series of helicopters landed on the CIA's office in Langley, Virginia. Now, a lot of people think the CIA is the intelligence agency for the United States, but it turns out that they only have a branch office in the United States. Their main headquarters is in Switzerland, which is where the banking cartel is located. So what happened is the military decided that they were going to actually do their job, what they were sworn to do to protect the Constitution of the United States. That's the oath of office. And they took that oath of office very seriously, and they wanted to protect the people in the United States. And they certainly couldn't protect the people in the United States if they were going to be ordered around by people who are betraying their oaths of office, because it turns out that the Constitution of the United States of 1789 is not in effect. It has not been in effect since 1861 because the banking cartel has put a second secret constitution in effect, and they've gone and they've corrupted all of the politicians, all of them. Because any politician that is not corrupt doesn't have a prayer of a chance when all of the media is going to be trying to tell you stories about them. And although many people no longer trust the media, this is a very formidable force for the politicians to be up against. Now, one of the things that we've been showing you on this series, which has been coming to you each week for 2.5 years, is you've seen that there must be another force that's more powerful than the banking cartel, or I wouldn't be here talking to you after this time and telling you all these things about the banking cartel. Well, it is correct. There is another force which is in control now, and that force is a coalition. This coalition was predicted by very accurate military technology. It's called the power transition model. That model came to me at the World Bank. I was working at the World Bank for over 20 years, and in 2007, I was ultimately thrown out because I started telling the people at the board of executive directors, some of whom became my friend, that they were actually working for the banking cartel and that the banking cartel was dominating the place. And that if we wanted to do what the World Bank was set up to do, we had to buck the system, because the system is actually the banking cartel. And the way the banking cartel maintains its power is through the money system. They get to keep all of the difference between what it costs to print the money, and in some cases, they don't even print the money, they just write it down in the books of the bank. And that's a lot of money that they get to keep. And we're duped. We believe that this system is correct, and we end up paying something called country debt. We pay interest on country debt, and it turns out that the bankers don't have the money. We, at the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, have all of the wealth of the world because of Jose Rizal, who came from the Philippines and didn't like this system. He rose up through the ranks in the Vatican, and then once he got into office at the end of World War II, he got Ferdinand Marcos to take all of the world's wealth, including the gold that he shipped off to Singapore, melted and stamped with the initials of the Global Debt Facility, which is TVM LSM 666, and those are the initials of Ferdinand Marcos's two sons. And a lot of people have been asking, what is this number 666? Because they're looking at what its meaning is in the Bible. Now, we are not going to be talking about religion, and that is because this is something which is going to get us sunk into controversy. And that's what the banking cartel wants. They want us to be up against each other. They use a system called divide and conquer. So we are just simply going to focus on the corruption in the money system, and we're going to dismantle that, and we are going to put the banking cartel into bankruptcy, because all of the world's wealth, as I've told you, is in this trust that was set up at the end of World War II by Jose Rizal and Ferdinand Marcos. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you a clip that was, we showed one other time on DCTV. If I had the teleprompter, I could tell you the exact date. But at the end of this show, I'm going to put the program up on YouTube, and then you'll see the teleprompter, and you'll be able to see the exact date. I believe it was in March 2017. Now, this clip came to me by Patricia Wright after I started talking about what happened in 2013. What happened? That was when the banking cartel thought they were going to nuke Charleston. And two heroes, Michael Carey, and this is, of course, why I have teleprompters. I believe that was Tim Giardina. These officers didn't obey their instructions to drop a nuclear bomb on Charleston. That was on the 7th or 8th of October in 2013. What they did was they detonated the bomb off the coast. And after that, they were harassed in the military, and a lot of the officers that were in charge of the nuclear command in the United States lost their jobs. And what Patience did was she found a clip that was of an interview. Christopher Hudson interviewed me a couple of weeks after this event and showed how all of the nuclear officers in the military were being fired because they had refused to nuke Charleston. So what you will see is that what I'm telling you is correct. And the other thing you'll see is that I'm not afraid to stand up to these banking cartel thugs. Why is it that I'm not afraid? I really couldn't tell you. I've just always been an obstreperous person. And I don't like when people tell me what to do, and what they're telling me to do is wrong. So you've seen in the last 2.5 years, I have, in any number of times, I've stood up to these thugs. And what's happened is people have realized that there really is a coalition that's stronger than the banking cartel. So, Carmen, maybe you can run that clip, and then we'll talk a little more about what this all means.
Because she has fallen for some what they call honey traps.
Wow.
In a hotel with two-way mirrors, she has been compromised.
I know what a honey trap is. Wow. Wow, that's...
And there are other things involving him. You know, his mother was a CIA agent, and he was raised in a way that that made him a person who would trap people with honey traps. That was his mother's job in the CIA, to entrap people in hotels.
Wow. That was a huge bomb.
I have one that's even worse.
I'm listening.
Okay. A couple of weeks ago, I believe it was the 8th of October, there was supposed to be a nuclear bomb detonated on South Carolina. And 2 Army generals made sure that that bomb went off the coast, 600 miles off the coast, and detonated undersea. And those military officers were fired. And now, at this point, there are about 180 generals and brass that are being fired. And these are the people that are protecting the citizens of the United States.
And a good evening to you on this Friday night, and we start with a developing story, a shakeup at the highest levels of the U.S. military. A top general in charge of nuclear weapons fired, and this comes 48 hours after another top military commander was dismissed. ABC's chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz has been talking to her sources all day, has the very latest on what's happening right now. Martha.
Diane, these officers have some of the highest security clearances you can get and have been in charge of the nation's most sensitive nuclear arsenals. A stunning chain of events. Today, Michael Carey, the 2-star general responsible for the nation's 3 intercontinental ballistic missile wings, fired from his command. The reason? personal misbehavior on a military business trip. This comes just 48 hours after President Obama himself relieved the number 2 in command over the nation's nuclear arsenal over his suspected use of counterfeit poker chips. These follow an alarming string of general officers losing their jobs this year for inappropriate behavior, misconduct, or lack of leadership. 2 Marine Corps generals fired less than 2 weeks ago for not providing proper force protection in Afghanistan. An Army Brigadier General relieved of duty for adultery. An Army 2-star general fired for groping a civilian. And in March, a Navy 1-star removed for racially insensitive comments and abusive leadership. Last spring, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was so concerned about all the high-profile cases, he sent a letter to Pentagon brass urging a recommitment to ethical leadership.
So what you see is a disconnect between the reality, which is that many of the troops, I've been told that it's about 70% of them, understand that we have been dominated by bankers, that they've taken away our Constitution, and that they even tried to get some of the disloyal officers in the military to drop bombs on Charleston, South Carolina, and they resisted. And what I've been telling you is that there's open insurrection in the military because they do not want to be dominated by this corrupt banking cartel. And they are loyal to the United States. And the United States actually has a lot of gold which has been placed into a trust at the World Bank and IMF. And I worked in the legal department of the World Bank and IMF for 21 years. And when I was fired illegally because I was reporting corruption, I didn't just accept that. I had this power transition model from the Department of Defense. It was actually from the National War College. And I knew that there would be coalitions and we could take back what it was that we were fighting, and we could fight the corruption. And I just never looked back. And the more people tried to shut me down, the more I pushed back. And the coalition has continued to form. And what you saw on the 18th of November is that there are a lot of troops in the U.S. military who understand that the government is corrupt, it's illegal, because there is no constitution in effect. The bankers replaced that constitution. They did that back in 1861. And so we are now in a situation where this coalition that I've been telling you about really exists, and we're going to win. And when we win, what we're going to do is we're going to dismantle this banking cartel. And all of the officers that are working for the banking cartel, they're going to be left in the lurch, because we're not going to punish them in the way of killing them or imprisoning them. If you think about the amount of corruption, we will just all of society will disintegrate. And we don't want that. What we want is a peaceful, smooth transition, which is very feasible because of this power transition model and because of this coalition that exists. And I'm speaking for them. You can tell I'm speaking for them, and you can see the coalition if you look in the comments section of the YouTube after we've downloaded these segments, or if you look in the exchanges on Twitter, or if you look in the exchanges on Facebook, you will see people who understand very well what's going on. There is something called a critical mass. That means that we've reached enough people, and they've looked into the facts as well, and they're working. We're all working together. So many of the questions are, what exactly are we going to do now that we're stronger than the banking cartel? And what we're going to do is we're going to first issue local currencies in the villages and towns. And we can't just suddenly switch from the banking cartel's paper currencies that are issued in the United States, that's the Federal Reserve Bank. We can't just switch suddenly. We have to do this systematically, and we've been describing the system, but we have to agree. I've been sending out draft agreements, and some of the countries are ready to negotiate. Who are those countries? One of them is Pakistan. But I wasn't ready to negotiate because we were not in a situation that we could deliver the gold that has to be minted. And we also have to set up systems in place so that the gold doesn't go missing. So that's it's going to take many, many years, because it's also taken many, many years for the corruption in the banking cartel to creep into all of our governments and for our legal governments to be replaced by thugs. That's what we have. And for example, when you have no constitution, that means that the Electoral College was not duly constituted. So Donald Trump is just an imposter. He's an actor. He's trying to convince us that he's the legitimate president, but there couldn't be anything further from the truth. He's simply an agent of the banking cartel. And we're going to have to find a way to replace him in a system that we all agree on. Fortunately, the founders of the United States understood what we were up against, and they put a provision in the Constitution called Article 5, which says that when the state legislatures have requested amendments, and 2/3 of them have done that, there should be a convention to figure out what needs to happen. And so that convention needs to be called and put a legitimate government back into place. We have not had that convention, and the reason we haven't is because the people in Congress refuse to do their job, refuse to obey the Constitution. This is a criminal act, the fact that they've just decided of their own whim not to follow the provisions of the Constitution. It's not surprising, actually, that they have done this, because the banking cartel, up until now, has been able to hoodwink everybody. But this is no longer the case. Enough of us realize what's going on, and the jig is up, and we are now trying to figure out how to go forward in a systematic way that's not going to disintegrate. We've got to have our economy working in transition. The way that we're proposing to do that is to allow the Federal Reserve notes. They're not dollars. If you read what's in the Constitution, we're supposed to have precious metals. We're supposed to have silver. That's supposed to be what the dollar is. Well, we can circulate precious metals, gold, the gold from the Global Debt Facility. There's a way to mint that gold so that it looks just like a paper currency. That's called aurum, but it contains gold dust inside, which is equivalent to the value of what the face amount of the bill is. We can use that at the same time as we use the counterfeit Federal Reserve notes. I say counterfeit because that's not supposed to be currency in our Constitution. So, and all of the other countries in the world, they are in a coalition, and they are also working to get rid of the banking cartel and their fake currencies. The BRICS, for example, they've agreed that their trade, which is 25% of world trade, is going to be offset from one country to the other. And if there's a difference in the net amount of the trade, they're going to pay for that in gold. So we are now in a transition, and what we can do in the United States is we can maintain our trusted position if we use the monetary gold reserves that are available to us in the global debt facility. I speak for the countries in the World Bank, and I've been issuing the minutes for the annual meetings. The last 4 annual meetings have had minutes which none of the embassies have contradicted. So you see, we're now in transition. We're in what we call the global currency reset, and there is a coalition which is stronger than the banking cartel, which is actually in charge. Now, if you go back into the teleprompter, you'll see a lot of proof that I've given you. You'll see the actual documents that I've sent out. And that's what I do. I document everything that I say because this is actual reality. And when you talk about what reality is, it depends on what people believe. That's the way reality is. And enough people understand what the truth is, enough people distrust the mainstream media that we are now in this reality. There have been questions about what is local currency. Local currency is whatever a village or town wants, what their merchants are willing to issue. There are some villages, like in the Berkshires, where they've already issued these local currencies, and it's up to every village to issue its own. When you do that, there is an economist called Silvio Giselle, and he has shown the benefits for local currencies. You get full employment overnight. What has been going on when we pay our taxes is that goes to the banking cartel. Ronald Reagan showed in a commission called the Grace Commission that all of the income taxes that are collected all leave the country, and there's nothing left. How are we paying for the services that we expect from our government? This is, you really don't want to know, but I'll tell you, it's because of illegal trafficking. It's because of the drug trade. There's all kinds of corruption that is at the very heart of our economies. And we're going to take many, many years and systematically wind down the banking cartel. And we're going to, what people do is they end up working for probably 4 months out of the year to pay their taxes. And when we're not going to be sending this money overseas to the banking cartel, you'll see our economy is going to improve. When we have full employment because of local currencies, our economies are going to improve. There have been many questions about what are we going to do about Social Security, what are we going to do about many of the payments that are going to people that are less fortunate. We obviously are going to have to figure out a transition so that we don't leave the people that need our assistance in the lurch. People are much kinder than we realize because we've been dominated by the banking cartel and their false media, which gives a lot of stories about the conflicts that are going on and doesn't really tell you about all of the kind-hearted good things that are also going on at the same time. We're going to find out who we really are. But the first thing that the banking cartel is going to find out is they're going to find out that they can't dupe us as easily as they thought. Enough of us know what's really up. What the banking cartel has also been doing is they've been using technology that makes it very difficult for us to sort things through. It's called scalar technology. The way we think, we use, it's like our brains are modems, and we're actually thinking in a different place. We're all working together in ways that we hadn't realized. It's called the collective unconscious. We're going to be learning about how we are actually all working together already. And that's also one of the ways that you know that we're going to have a peaceful transition, because if we're all working together already, and enough of us know that the banking cartel has been lying to us, then we've actually already done a very large part of the transition. Now, I'm getting some signals that we're about to run out of time, and it's time for me to wrap things up. So I'm going to be downloading this segment on YouTube tonight. I want you to be raising questions. Okay, thank you. Until next week then.